Что там у меня такое? Криспи. Хотя жрать ладно. Согрелся. Ладно, завали. Не буду. Вот это и есть то самое, да. Да, понимаю. По сути дела, да. Ну, наверное, да, вот ответ. Да, наверное, да. Это все варианты одного и того же, понимаешь, объективное какое-то вот мироздание, да. Да, как бы. Ну, он тебя понял. Косяками, короче, а как это объяснить, что здоровые клетки, надо. Ну, это так, но вы не верите в человека в себе, скажем, да, как не живу, понимаете, да. Или не знаете, может быть, человека в себе, или знать не желаете, да, что вот, понимаю, это еще страшнее. Они потом спрашивают, почему тебе, то есть, тебя не испугало, я когда ознакомился с христианской религией, так скажем, более глубоко, то есть, более глубоко познакомился, да, неважно это, да, вообще, да. Там есть такой миф про то, что происходит, люди сами приходят, то есть сами себя обрекают, да, то есть, и как бы, и ты вдруг, да, понимаешь, то есть, как бы это про тебя же говорят, ты же тоже человек, понимаешь, да, к примеру, то есть, а как так? А почему я такое решаюсь? А что тогда делать-то? Хорошо, давай так. Если ты такой христианин или мусульманин, как жить? Ну, мусульманство там опасно, там, потому что, да, такой религиозный человек, да, как жить тогда по религии? Знаешь, или там христианин, как по-христиански жить, да? Да, понимаю. И чем больше ты будешь, тем больше будет похоже на то, что я тебе говорю, да. Да, понимаю. Да, и что дальше? И ты будешь говорить, что люди будут растворяться в воздухе, в Бога, типа того. Но как бы это не зафиксированные факты. Где вот эти факты? В малом, да, то есть как бы, либо мы еще очень сильно не доросли до этого, либо мы знаем плохо психологию, да, все, да, понимают. То есть, ну, есть такая гипотеза, да, что как бы типа того. Да, понимаешь. То есть, и как бы науки, наверное, да. Ну, как бы, грубо говоря. Но это опять же гипотеза. Нужен инструмент, чтобы это, да, то есть, как бы, чтобы хотя бы что-то можно было сгипотезировать, так скажем, да. То есть, да. Это наши догадки только, что может быть есть какой-то, может, но не может. Ну и что, это я только, ну и, я понимаю просто, да. Если это действительно так, то ты должен в суд на всех подавать, кто в учебниках пишет, что не пишет, точнее, что душа не имеет веса, или что не существует души, или еще что-то. Ты просто нагло к ним приходишь и говоришь, вот мы, да, понимаешь, и они говорят, вы такой человек, такой сякой. И они, да, понимаешь, как бы, и ты на них подаешь в суд, и суд рассматривает, и суд решает. Ваших доказательств нету, все, они раскапывают это все. Ну, не знаешь, что ли, да, и там, ну, нету такого факта. То есть как просто все, точка. Либо скажут, нет инструмента, который может это измерить. Да, если есть инструмент, ну, то есть как бы можешь время сэкономить. Да, понимает он это. Для этого надо заниматься очень плотно наукой. Да. Ну, то есть, ну, наверное, да. Ну, так быстрее будет намного. Да. Ну, не знаю, я просто так уже, да. Ну, да. Ну, не знаю, какие еще там. Прана изменения, да. Аура, шняура. Любая вот эта херня, да. Все, нету. И как ты, и фотографии ауры сколько там? И дальше что? Да, понимаю. Да. Ну, то есть невозможно, как это невозможно доказать? Что тогда не так? Не с фотоаппаратами, что не так с чем? С кем? Поняла тебя просто, да. Да, то есть вы все мошенники, шарлатаны, то есть вот и все. В науке очень просто говорят, ты очень хочешь в это верить, вот и все. Заангажирован, да. Вот, да, то есть, и все так оно и есть. Если ты пойдешь по этому пути, будет Аль-Каида. Да, это путь лжи, потому что да, там нет никакого пути, это все вранье просто. Бабское в мужском. Путь верований, упований, это женская тема. Это у них получается, и да. Ну, что теперь сделать, не знаю. Наверное, так. Ну и ты и проживешь свою жизнь, ну да, и что ты смогла сделать, да. Пожалуйста. Ну да. Нужен конкретный, либо эксперимент, серия целых экспериментов. Да, понимаю. Это все дорогостоящее довольно занятие, это точно говорю, да. Поэтому даже если ты в суд подашь, как бы тебе бабки надо будет не только за суд, если их работу, да. Ладно. Самый гуманный суд. Ну там же им тоже что-то надо, там подавай, как говорится, да. Это же тоже огромная работа, чтобы. Да, понимаю. Меня не касается, я просто так уже говорю. Вот это тоже правильно. Давайте верить мошенникам, тогда все. Да, народ. Ну да. Ну это другое, понимаю, да. Да. Короче, работать можно, знаешь. Вот, да, точно. Вот так я тебе реально говорю, понимаешь? Если ты представь себе завтра, например, завтрашний день люди взвесили ауру. Вот реально просто раз взвесили. Столько это, ну, к примеру. Все, мир перевернут. То есть те, кто занимается чем-то вот этим биологией, микрохимией, там все эти, да, эти все такие, блин, да ты врешь. Опа, слушай, это как так? Ну, попробуй сам. Ой, реально, взвешивается. И вот ты вес, да, потом. Нет, у тебя прибор врет. Все, это неправильный прибор у тебя. Разобрали прибор, все там, понимаешь, да. Разобрались, повторили эксперимент других, то есть, да, понимаешь. Все, факт, понимаете, у тебя. И люди оттуда начинают, да, понимаете, да, брать себя, понимаете. Да. Только так всегда было, и, ну, как бы, и что теперь ты хочешь сказать? Да, то есть это надо, ну, так вот, да. Да, поняла тебя, да. Но это не может быть новый, да, она поняла. Поймешь, да, да. Ну, где не работает, скажи, да. Я другая область, не работает, да. Ну, да. Нет, ты не сделаешь шаг вперед, естественно. Ты понимаешь. Ну, так неинтересно же тогда даже. Вот это да, смело. Да, это надо же даже. Ну нет, значит, не так, нет, значит, давайте. Дело, да. Вот, я понял, просто. Жизнь свою жить она не опасна, ее бы в жопу себе засунь, и святой Иван, ты умер, оказалось, что вообще ничего мужского в тебе не было вообще. Ничего не оставил этом, да. Женщин за подобное вот тебя оставить, их потомство. Большие, умные, красивые. Да! Самостоятельно. Выживающие очень сильно. Ну, ладно, смешает уже. Должно быть. Кто должен быть? Как бы, ну, свирепый это мужик на первых порах может быть. На первых порах. Потом, да. Ну, вообще, кто как бы по природе более свирепый? Мужчина или женщина? Да, то есть более жестокий, более жесткий. Да, наоборот, что делать? Он все наоборот опять. Наоборот, да. По натуре, по гормонам даже, тупо, не знаю, что сказать. Да, не знаю. Ну да. Ну, да. Смелость, да. Смелость. Скромный, да. Да. Наверное, то же самое, да.
Well, welcome to today's talk. It's Thursday, the 9th of December. I want to do a bit of an Omicron update. Still reasonably optimistic, but let's go into some detail straight away on this. Now, this one is the Louise Restaurant Bar and the night of the 26th of November. So this is Oslo. It's a Christmas party, pretty early Christmas party, I would say, but nevertheless. Scartex Solar Power Company. One or two returned travellers from South Africa. There was actually two travellers returned from South Africa. Only one of them turned out to be positive, though, for SARS coronavirus 2. Had returned a few days earlier, so had been knocking around as normal in Norway after his return, where there was fairly limited restrictions actually at that time. Now, there's 120 people went to this party. 120, all doubly vaccinated from the Santec Solar Power Company group. And they had their own Christmas dinner and everything. At about 11:30, when it was a bit later on, they started mingling with people outside later on from other guests from the hotel. Now, there were 70 of the 120 tested positive the day after, or in the days after, and 50 others from the hotel as well. So that's a total of 120 people testing positive. So 120 in the original company group, 70 of those tested positive. but they also infected 50 others in the hotel in the same evening. The 26th of November, by the way, was the evening, or the 26th of November was the day when the World Health Organization named the Omicron variant as a variant of concern. Half have tested positive for Omicron, it's more than half, as we said, it's 70 out of 120. 13 have been confirmed with sequencing. The others are assumed to be Omicron from the S gene dropout that we know about. So it looks like most of those are in fact, Omicron variant. Dr. Tini Ravlo, Oslo Infectious Diseases, they have symptoms like fever, cough, headache, muscle pain, fatigue. Interesting. So they have got symptoms, as quite a lot of people are symptomatic in the group. But now, and this was as of yesterday actually, this was yesterday's report, none of them have become severely ill and none of them have been treated in hospital. So of the 120, so far zero have become ill, which is encouraging. And this is actually 15 days ago now, I think. So the time is ticking on. So the next day, one of the two employees recently returned from South Africa tested positive, and then the other ones were found as well. Now, Norway's state epidemiologist, Fordland, sheer number of people infected at a single event, Omicron considerably more infectious than the Delta. So the sheer number of people that are infected, 120 people altogether infected in that one evening, shows that this is a highly transmissible variant. The Omicron is more transmissible than the Delta. And when we look at what happened to Norway, this is really quite telling as well. Where are we? There we are. So this is Norway throughout the pandemic. So pretty low cases, what we might call first, second and third wave in Norway, but low numbers all the way through really. Until we get to the end here where we see this sudden increase here. And it looks like a lot of this is now on. Where are we? There we are. So this is Norway throughout the pandemic. So pretty low cases, what we might call first, second and third wave in Norway, but low numbers all the way through really. Until we get to the end here where we see this sudden increase here. And it looks like a lot of this is now Omicron driven. So way more numbers in Norway than there ever have been, probably originating, many of them originating in that particular party. So this Professor Forlander, Norwegian Institute of Public Health, he says there's one of the three scenarios for Omicron is that it would be both very mild and very transmissible. So that was a possibility. And he says that is the hope. That is the best scenario we can have. That it's getting, that says milder, but that should be getting milder. That most people will get it. Most people, probably just about everyone, is going to get it. And they will get a natural immunity. So the professor here is clearly saying that this will be associated with a natural immunity, which of course is absolutely brilliant if it's minimal, it's symptomatic disease. It might be that it is now replicated and mutated so many times that this is the optimal position from the virus's point of view to spread widely and not kill the host. So what the virus wants to do is to reproduce as much as possible. And if it goes around killing people, it's going to reproduce less, because if it kills someone, it's not going to carry on reproducing from that person. So it's natural that viruses do evolve to become milder. It looks like this process has been accelerated, as we saw yesterday when we said Omicron caught a cold. In other words, it got a particular genetic sequence from a common cold coronavirus. And the professor in Norway goes on to say, that's what we've seen with other diseases beforehand, so this is a pattern he's familiar with. And of course, it then gets into more like an endemic phase. And this is me speaking, so this is not the end, because we know it's not the end because there's still a lot of Delta going on in the world, and the Delta is not finished yet. But I've said here, nor is it the end of the beginning, because I think we're past the beginning. We're past the end of the beginning, and I think really this could well be the beginning of the end. So if you'll excuse the melodrama there, I think that's probably roughly where we're at. But it's not the end yet, and I want to tell you why there's things I'm still concerned about. So Delta is still ravaging many, many countries. So here we have the new daily confirmed COVID cases per million people. And we go look at Japan, where the numbers are very low, and India, the numbers are still pretty low. Australia, Canada, South Africa has increased, of course, and we know this is all Omicron in South Africa. The United States, quite high, but we still believe that's mostly Delta, but causing quite a lot of hospitalizations in the States. That's the United Kingdom there. We see Norway, presumably Delta, presumably Omicron driven, has overtaken the United Kingdom, but of course we are getting daily more and more Omicron cases in the United Kingdom. Denmark, we know there's quite a lot of Omicron, and Ireland, it's quite unclear why the cases are so high at the moment in Ireland. So that's the sort of demographic, not demographic, but the incidence at the moment, or prevalence at the moment. The number of new COVID patients in hospital per million, which is probably the most important. This is the data that we have. So Denmark, we do see an increase. Norway, the numbers are low. There's a few days data missing, but the numbers are still low. United Kingdom higher, Ireland higher, United States. We know that in some areas of the States, hospitals are under quite a lot of pressure actually at the moment. There's a lot of dispatch around the country. Deaths, well, the United States deaths remain stubbornly high, unfortunately. Indeed, have gone up quite a lot with this current Delta increase. Ireland, the deaths have gone up as well. United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, thankfully low. Canada, India, South Africa, Australia, Japan. So they're the deaths at the moment. And what else have we got here? This is the estimated reproduction rate. So this is the R1 here. This line here is 1. So below this, it's getting less. Above that, it's getting more. And we see the only country where cases are still reducing is Japan. Denmark, which has Omicron, is increasing. The United Kingdom, which is Omicron and Delta, is increasing. Ireland, we don't have genomic data. Canada, United States, Norway, which is probably largely Omicron driven, is increasing. And South Africa, which we know is pretty well entirely Omicron driven, well, is entirely, virtually over 90% Omicron driven. Very high rate of increase indeed, well over an R value of over 2. Now, this is a bit out of date. South Africa is over 90% now. United States, that's probably about the latest we've got. India, Japan, Australia, Canada, Norway, we believe that Omicron is much higher than this, but we don't have the firm data yet. Denmark, we believe is much higher than that, but we don't have the firm data yet. United Kingdom, it will be higher than this, but again, not firm data yet. And Ireland, sadly, somewhat lagging behind in terms of profiling. Moving age case fatality rates, so people dying per number of cases. India is quite high at the moment, which is sad to see. But looking at the other countries, so countries where there's more Omicron, like Denmark and Norway, very low figures. Ireland, not so many people dying. United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Japan. That's actually the United States there, because these are all sort of compressed down a bit. That gives you the order. So countries where there's a lot of Omicron spreading, like South Africa, the death rate is actually pretty low in South Africa. So this is the South Africa line here. And we see that the death rate has actually come down as Omicron has increased. And of course, this is really remarkably encouraging, that we're hoping Omicron is going to be very, very mild. Now, we talked about the clinical features of Omicron yesterday from Dr. Kotzier in South Africa. And we've had some interesting communications from you as well. Sally reported, I've had Delta this time last year, pretty rough, took 6 months to recover. Really, Sally, that is a long time. It just shows it can be a long time. And I have Omicron now. The symptoms of Omicron are as you state, which we'll go over in a minute, and she is vaccinated. So it looks like these symptoms are being consistent. Helgaard in Gauteng in South Africa, in the epicenter, have tested positive 2 days ago. The symptoms is 100% correct as stated. Also, after first symptoms, 3 days, and I don't even know that I was sick. So symptoms only lasted, feeling better after 3 days. So Sally and Helgaard both confirming the symptoms of Omicron because they're both Omicron positive. And let's just look at what these are. The symptoms that we know so far are muscle aches and pains, so achiness, headache, tiredness which lasts to 1 or 2 days, slightly sore throat, no cough and no runny nose. So we are getting sort of collaboration that these do seem to be the main symptoms that are present, and these ones do seem to be the ones that are absent. We'll get much more data on that once Tim Spector gets going, of course. He's the best at getting the data on this. But let's look at some South Africa data now, because South Africa, as we've said, really is the sentinel on this. Now, this first slide from South Africa is the number of hospital admissions, and we are seeing an increase in the last couple of weeks. This data week here, week 49, is not yet complete. So we are seeing some increase in hospitalizations in South Africa. Now, this doesn't tell us why these patients are admitted, but it does tell us there's been an increase in hospitalizations, although not a dramatic one, it has to be said, compared to where we were earlier in the year. Now, this is current ward, these are patients in the wards in South Africa. 4.8, so 4,800 people actually in hospital. And these are people that have been diagnosed with SARS coronavirus 2. We know in South Africa it's basically all Omicron now. Not necessarily because they're in hospital for SARS coronavirus 2. In fact, most of them were just discovered to be SARS coronavirus 2 positive, incidentally, because everyone going to hospital gets tested. So they're the number of people. So currently, these are in intensive care, these are in high care, and these are on the general ward. And this is for the whole 40 million population of South Africa, patients in hospital with COVID-19 or SARS coronavirus 2 positivity at the moment. And this shows the intervention. So there's 148 people that are positive in South Africa that are being ventilated, and 662 for the whole country that are receiving oxygen. So we see a continued very low rate of oxygen requirement, and this was live as of about an hour ago. This is from the live reference, which I'll give you. So very few people being oxygenated, requiring oxygen in South Africa, who are hospitalized with SARS coronavirus 2 confirmed infection. And of course, this is Omicron infection. So this remains encouraging. Now, this is the number of deaths in South Africa. This is for these are the weeks. So this is 2021. This is halfway through the year, week 25. Deaths went down quite nicely, and we see that so far is there an increase. Well, in that week there was 102, up from 55. So there is a slight increase, And this shows the weekly reported deaths in South Africa altogether. And this actually is the most concerning slide I'm showing today. It does actually show that there is an increase in overall deaths in South Africa. Now, it doesn't tell us why this increase is there, but that's above the upper and lower average for the time of year. So there is a slight increase in deaths in South Africa, but as I say, we don't know why that is. We just know that it is the case at the moment. And this shows the way that Delta's taken over in South Africa. So, sorry, that's Delta taking over there. This shows the way that Omicron's taken over. So, first of all, we had Beta, which was the original South Africa variant here. And that was outcompeted by Delta. And now Delta is being outcompeted by Omicron. So that's the pattern in South Africa at the moment. We see that virtually everyone at the moment who's positive in South Africa is coming up positive for Omicron, having replaced Delta. And this is an important point. The Omicron from South Africa is replacing Delta. It's not as well as, it's instead of. So here's all the references we've just looked at there. So do click on those for yourself. Just check them out. They're all there. And click away. Now, Sir Patrick Ballon, speaking in from Downing Street yesterday, Chief Scientific Officer for the UK, from pandemic to endemic, where this becomes a more regular infection like flu over time. So there's a move, he's seeing this move to becoming more endemic. So that is good. This virus has mutated a lot quickly, and that is sort of what you would expect at this stage. So again, this is consistent with his experience. The good news is that so far, and again, of course, he's hedging his bets here, as we all are, but I'm quite optimistic. It looks as though when you get very high antibody levels with the booster vaccine, it's definitely having some effect against it in the laboratory study. So he's saying that the booster vaccine works there, which we looked at data for that yesterday. But I'm also optimistic, which he's not really commenting on, is that people aren't getting sick, but he's keeping his powder dry on that at the moment. Boris Johnson is British Prime Minister, so again, working from home on Monday. This is the so-called Plan B, or aspects of the Plan B are now being implemented to prevent spread. Work from home on Monday, face masks in public venues, COVID mandates for passes for nightclubs and other crowded areas, daily testing instead of isolation for Omicron variant. So here we can see that they're expecting so many Omicron contacts that they've gone over to daily testing as opposed to isolation, because it means that no one will be available to go to work. So it's looking like, apart from that slight increase in the overall deaths in South Africa, it is looking remarkably promising for Omicron being a very mild disease, and the Omicron should replace Delta, as Delta replaced Alpha, and as Delta replaced Alpha in the UK, and as Delta replaced Beta in South Africa, which was originally called the South Africa variant. So we see that clear evolution in South Africa, which is really quite encouraging. So it could be that the pandemic is well and truly on its way out in terms of causing people to get sick, if it is that the Omicron variant continues not to make people sick. The big proviso is, of course, it can be sometimes 2, 3 or 4 weeks before people get sick, but we're not seeing it yet, apart from this slight increase in deaths in South Africa. As I say, we don't know why there's an increase in deaths and hospitalizations in South Africa, even though they're not marked. We do know that most of the cases of SARS coronavirus 2 positivity in hospitals in South Africa have been incidental findings. So still fairly frustrating, still on tenterhooks really, seeing how this is going to go, but it is looking promising. Now, I'm just going to do a quick talk about this plant-based coronavirus vaccine from Canada. GlaxoSmithKline and Medicago. I don't know how to pronounce that. Primary endpoints and secondary endpoints in the trial have been met. And the trial here is dominated in the variants phase. Now, it's pre-Omicron days, but it's post-wild type of virus days. So this is invariant days, presumably alpha, beta, and delta waves. This was mostly trialed in. Efficacy demonstrated against all variants seen in the study. So this particular vaccine seems to be working against all variants. 75.3 efficacy in COVID-19 of any severity caused by the Delta variant. So looking good for the Delta variant. Now, it's so interesting this because it's brewed up in plant cells, which is fascinating. Vaccine candidate was well tolerated with no serious events reported in the vaccine group. 24,000 adults. Again, phase 3 placebo-controlled trial. And this is the Canadian plant-based vaccine. Now, this is the world's first ever vaccine where the antigen is actually brewed up in plant cells. This is just absolutely a brilliant step forward for vegetarians and vegans, and probably for the entire world as well, because it's brewed upon potato cells and corn cells. It really is a major new way to make vaccines. And the British GlaxoSmithKline pandemic adjuvant is going in it. Now, the adjuvant is something which increases the immune reaction to the vaccine, to the actual antigen. So, in other words, the Canadian group are producing the antigen, which is the bit that the human immune system will actually recognise as being foreign, and the adjuvant is making the antigen more antigenic, if you like, generating a better immune response. Brian Ward, medical officer at Medicago, plants that are used simply as bioreactors to produce the antigen. So they produce in bioreactors with plant cells. Health Canada, US FDA, UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, and the World Health Organization have all been approached for approval. So interesting what will happen there. World Health Organization point out, produce cheaply in very high amounts. Carrier plants such as potatoes and corn. Antigen created are fridge stable. So the antigen is the actual vaccine, the part of the vaccine that the immune system will recognize as being foreign. Fridge stable, so you can ship it all around the world in a normal icebox. Can be stored for long periods of time. Don't know how long, probably talking months. Likelihood that a plant virus will get in the way is minimal. So that is good because plant viruses don't generally infect. I've never heard of a plant virus infecting any animal, actually. Vets and botanists out there, correct me by all means, but I've never heard of a plant virus jumping to an animal. Virus-like particles for protein vaccines. So they're producing virus-like particles, but they're empty shells with no RNA. So we're going to end up with something that's kind of, I don't know what it's like yet, but it's going to look like a bit like a. It won't be shaped like the virus. It'll have the proteins, the same protein constituents, I would imagine. But of course, there's no RNA inside it, so it's not transmissible. It's not going to make the person sick. So keep an eye on that. But plant-based vaccines, wow, that really is a new thing. It's not new. It's been on the go for. They've been developing it for about 20 years. It's just sort of come to fruition at the right time. And then finally, Sally, who we saw had typical symptoms before, asked this question: can you explain how one variant replaces another? Does the other variant just fade out? So can you explain? So in this case, the Omicron variant is more transmissible, more able to survive, more likely to reproduce than the Delta variant. So it simply outcompetes. So this is natural evolution. It's the survival of the fittest, and the less fit. And in this case, thankfully, very, very thankfully, the less fit variant is the Delta variant. So it is simply outcompeted by a fitter variant. Does the other variant just fade out? Well, it goes away. It doesn't fade out. It's outcompeted. It is denied the ecological niches, that is in you and me. It is denied the ecological niches in which to reproduce. So it has nowhere to reproduce, so it dies out. Yeah, it does fade out. It's outcompeted, in this case, by the Omicron variant. So it's a simple Darwinian survival of the fittest situation. So, and as we saw in that graphic, basically there's no Delta reproducing now in South Africa. It's all Omicron, and that is my hope for the world. We really are, the next couple of weeks is going to be pretty tense, and but so far it's looking like Omicron could be our way out of this pandemic. Not human beings being clever, it's just the natural evolution of the viruses. So cause for human humility there, I think. So I remain optimistic. I'm going to report on this till we've got something definite, and it really is so far so good. Just before I go, we put the thing on yesterday for free downloads of the books. Not books. Lots of people have done that, and I was actually talking to my. These are free in PDFs, of course. I was talking to a technician about it, and he says that he thinks that since the middle of last year we've downloaded about 90,000 copies. So I'm just so pleased. You sit there, writing books, and your whole life ends up going into these flipping books. It takes ages, and then sometimes you'll spend all day writing. You think, God, I'm really tired after a day's writing. Do you think anyone is ever going to read this? And the idea that 90,000 people have downloaded it and hopefully are reading it really is it really is great justification for all the happy days. That weren't that bad, but all the days I spent writing these two books, and there were quite a few of them. So absolutely delighted they're being read, and hopefully the diagrams are being coloured in and all that kind of thing. So I drew all the diagrams. I'm not artistic, but I just sort of can draw simple diagrams like that and put the labels on and kind of explains hopefully what's going on. So free downloads, help yourselves, and let's get to 100,000. That would be brilliant. Okay, thank you for watching.
Как-нибудь недорого.
Это надо искать.
Смотри.
Банкиру легко подает выгодный кредит с высокой вероятностью одобрения.
Здорово!
Банкиру знает, где выгоднее.
А зачем? Вот это, ну, давайте, да, ты все равно проживешь так или иначе. Надо прожить лучше, чем все. Ну вот это и было самое.
אבא שלי ראה אותי בפעם הראשונה שנולדתי, הוא החליט לעזוב את המשפחה. רציתי ליצור איתו קשר, להגיד לו שינסה לחזק אותי. גם אז הוא לא ענה לי. כל השנים אני ואמא שלי נלחמנו לבד. קוראים לי אריאלה, אני בת 16, נולדתי עם תסמונת גולדנהר. אני עכשיו מתמודדת עם שמיעה שהיא יורדת מדי פעם, וזה סכנה שאני יכולה להיות חרש בעצם, וגם יש לי ירידה משמעות. וגם יש לי ירידה משמעות.
You're ничего не знаю. Эй, надо посмотреть. Надежда это глупо. Да. Можно ли сыграть так просто? Ты что, не понимаешь, что ли? Я понимаю, ладно. Начальный замысел был такой, 3 консерватории. Там джазухи обучаться, когда ты все уже умеешь, надо джазом заниматься. Может не так, чтобы, но изучить надо обязательно. Нет, сейчас ты некая уже будет даже сухо. Первый исток. Здравствуйте, полуношеньки, улыбнёшеньки. Огорода. Сейчас что надо жрать и спать. Надо 12. Байрам. Вот это именно. Наоборот, видимо. Эти штучки. Это штучечник. Это штучка. Наоборот, да. Не скажи, блядь, ну да, Спорно, это же не спорно. Unofficials. Замечательно. Молодец. Видишь, что?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today we are going to talk about a composer that has been requested a lot, and that is Franz Schubert, who was very sort of unhappy composer. He didn't live very long. He only lived to age 31. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about his life, his personality, his death, and not too much about his music, because I'm going to save that for the next video, just so we can give it like full coverage, so I don't like let him down. He had a lot of music, so there's a lot to talk about there. So anyway, let's just get right into it. Schubert was born in 1797 and he died in 1828, so a very short life. And that time period makes him a transitional composer from the classical period to the romantic period, much like Beethoven was in his later years, actually. He was born in Vienna. His lesbian out there. His dad was a teacher and his mom was a housemaid. He had a pretty humble origin. He had some brothers and sisters. And he went to his dad's school where he received music lessons and, from his dad and also from his older brothers. It was actually Antonio Salieri who first took notice of Schubert's talent as a vocalist, especially. So if you've ever seen the movie Amadeus, which you should, it's an awesome movie about Mozart. Salieri is Mozart's rival in the movie, and it's speculated they were rivals in real life as well. So Schubert was accepted into the Stadtkonvikt school at age 11 thanks to Salieri, and he had vocal scholarship for it. Once Schubert's talent became even more evident, even at such an early age, young to mid-teenager, he was writing a lot of compositions, and he was leading the symphony of the school sometimes. Antonio Salieri decided to take a special interest in him and gave him private tutoring and stuff like that. So that takes us to the year 1814. Schubert was 17 years old at the time, and he was like, okay, well, I'm done school now, and he went to work for his dad, as kids sometimes do. So he worked as a teacher at his dad's school, but he hated it. Schubert wasn't really a working kind of person. Around that time in his late teens, he also fell in love with a girl. I almost sang that, but I didn't. And her name was Therese. She was a singer, and Schubert wrote lots of songs for her to sing. But there was actually kind of crazy law back then that unless, as a man, you couldn't marry a woman unless you could prove that you had the wealth, the income to support a family. And since Schubert wasn't a worker in the traditional sense, he obviously didn't have that. And then there's the part about he wasn't exactly the most desirable person. Both in his physical appearance and his personality, but we'll talk about that more in a bit. So in 1816, he decided to quit working at his father's school. He's like, I'm tired of this job thing, and he decided to move in with a close friend of his, Schubert, and Schubert's mom. At first, Schubert tried to sort of half-heartedly tried to make an income doing private music lessons, but he wasn't really into it. And what he is and Schubert's mom. At first, Schubert tried to sort of half-heartedly tried to make an income doing private music lessons, but he wasn't really into it. And what he sort of just ended up falling by the wayside. And what he was doing instead was just composing tons. At this point, he was only 19, but he had already written hundreds of compositions, and that was from everything from symphonies to tons of vocal works called lieders. So Schubert's roommate, Schubert, it's a little bit confusing to say that, Schubert was responsible for introducing Schubert to a man named Johann Vogel, who was a famous baritone singer at the time. And Vogel was quite a bit older than Schubert, but they formed a friendship, a mutual respect. And Vogel, since he was sort of famous and influential, he brought Schubert into the Viennese music scene. And because of Vogel, Schubert made a lot of really important friends and a lot of really important contacts. And they used to all have parties where Schubert would play music at these private parties, and he'd play the piano, and someone like Vogel would do the singing. And Schubert wrote a lot of pieces with Vogel's voice in mind, and he did that a lot with his music. He wrote with specific singers in mind. So around this time, Schubert, he wasn't having any luck with publishing. And even though he was writing tons of music, he just wasn't very well known, so people really weren't publishing him. And he tried to get into doing stage shows like operas. He tried doing over 20 of them, but they all bombed basically for one reason or another, political censorship or drama with the singers and all kinds of stuff like that. So he just wasn't having a lot of financial success, and he wasn't getting very well known. But the theme of his life is, despite all of these hardships, he was still writing tons of music. So then 1825 rolled around, Schubert would have been around 28 years old. And he was starting to have some successes in life. He was making a little bit of money. He was able to publish some of his music, and he even went on a little private tour to Austria. And he didn't really travel much in his, he didn't have either money or the inclination to travel. So that was a happy time in his life. And for the last few years of his life, he continued to write lots of music. Surprise, surprise. In 1828, he also gave the only public performance of his own works, because prior to that, all of his performances had been private, in his personal performances, where he, was playing at a party or something like that. This is something we'll find in the next video when we talk about the music of Schubert, but you really only get a sense of who he really was as a person by listening to his music. because he didn't live an exciting outer life. He was very reserved, and for him, he had this like very glorious inner life that came out through his music. So it's only his music where you could really see his brilliance. It wasn't in his outward personality. But before we get into all of that, we got to talk about his death, because that's next. It happened in 1828. That's about where we are in his story. So Schubert officially died of typhoid fever, although in 1823 he did contract syphilis. And I mean, the official records state that he died of the fever, and that's probably true. Though I think it's a possibility that there were some symptoms of syphilis and mercury poisoning playing into it. Near the end of his life, like especially in the last year, Schubert was like pretty confident. He knew that death was approaching. He was like pretty in touch with that. He was expressing his fears to his friends, and he was expressing a lot of themes of death in his music. And a couple hours before he died, when he was sick and delirious, he grabbed his doctor's arm and he said, here is my death. So Schubert knew it was up. So as for the mercury poisoning, it was a really common thing back then to treat syphilis with mercury, with medicine that had mercury in it. So it was a pretty common thing to happen at the time. And we don't know conclusively if he actually died from the fever, or if there were just some symptoms of mercury poisoning, or like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But regardless of his manner of death, the one thing that at least you can say is his death happened pretty quickly. So I mean, maybe that's a small mercy. He actually only, his final illness was actually only a couple weeks long, and he'd only been really considering the possibility of death for a couple of years at most. Whereas some composers like Beethoven, they spend decades, not even just years, but decades, just slowly degrading. So in a way, it's like what's worse. He could have maybe lived longer and more music, but then he would have had to suffer for a long time. I don't know. This isn't a morality channel. Schubert was buried next to Beethoven as per his request in his birthplace of Vienna. Schubert's early death at age 31 was obviously a huge shock to his friends. But despite only living for 31 years, it blows my mind how much music he wrote. He wrote over 1,500 songs. Think about that for a second. And not all of them are just little tiny leaders that are 2 minutes long. Some of those are symphonies. 1,500! Schubert never really achieved fame in his lifetime. He had a social circle of musicians who considered him a genius, and some people in his social circle were quite famous at the time. But Schubert himself never really made it. And I think there's a few reasons for that we can talk about. I mean, I think part of it is he was maybe a little bit before his time. He was on the cusp of a new generation of music, but being a transitional composer, maybe some of his music didn't exactly resonate with the people of his time, and more it resonated with the people after his death. Because there were a lot of romantic composers, especially Liszt, who helped to bring Schubert's music into the public eye. And what Liszt did is he took some songs by Schubert and he arranged them for piano. And he, obviously everything Liszt touched turned to gold. So he was a really big proponent to Schubert. He said that Schubert was the most poetic musician who ever lived, and was a big force in bringing Schubert's music to the light. There were other romantic composers too, like Mendelssohn and Brahms and Schumann, who also championed Schubert's works and helped, bring him out of obscurity. And now, obviously, he's one of the most famous composers who ever lived, but it was largely because of these guys. There were people like Berlioz and Dvorak who really liked and respected his symphonies. So, yeah. Lots of love for Schubert from the next generation. Schubert was not a beautiful man. In fact, his friends called him Schwammerl, which translates roughly to little mushroom, because he was really small. He was also pretty stocky. He was less than 5 feet tall. He was just a little guy. And aside from, being really short, he was also nearsighted, and he wore glasses, spectacles all the time. And he wasn't a very outgoing personality type. Actually, he was quite the opposite. He's very shy and sort of antisocial, so that didn't help him very much in the romance department. I think a big part of why Schubert never achieved fame, and this, I don't mean it in a harsh way, but I think part of that was his personality. And he was just not a self-promoter, is I guess maybe a better way to say it. It's not that he necessarily had a bad personality, he just wasn't social. I mean, word of his talent really was only confined to his small but influential, but small social circle. He never really put himself out there. But the thing find really cool about Schubert is he had like such clarity about his life purpose at such a young age that like so many people never achieve. Like he actually wrote, "I've come into the world for no purpose but to compose." And because of this single-minded focus, like he really did that. He succeeded in his life mission. And because he was so single-mindedly focused only on composing, he didn't care about promotion. He didn't care about like putting himself out there or like being a social person. He knew what he wanted to do and he did it. And I mean, in a way, his music got promoted anyway. He's a very famous composer now, so I guess you could even say, even though he wasn't famous in his lifetime, he didn't care about fame, he didn't care about wealth, people still ended up promoting him anyway, and his music still got out to the world. So I can't say that was a character flaw. So ultimately, Schubert was this unhappy, unsocial guy on the outside, but on the inside, in his inner world, the world of his music, there was so much beauty and inspiration and exuberance and joy. So he is really like a great example of the old saying that you can't judge a book by its cover. So that is all for today's video on the history of Schubert, talking about his life, his personality. So in the next video, I really hope you'll come and visit me for it. We're going to explore the music of Schubert, his musical style, the things that he innovated, and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy history videos and these kind of videos in general, give them a like. I really appreciate it when you do. And if you have any requests for future videos, as always, feel free to leave a comment in the little area below. And we'll catch you guys next time. I can't feel my fat. Move. Move. Cute.
ねえ、この辺で一回休まない？私ちょっと疲れました。そうだね。だいぶ歩いたし。ロックさん、いいですか？
もちろん。
リノア、ありがとう。そこで休もうよ。本当に違う世界なんだね。こんな広いのに何にもない。 前に呼ばれた時は敵がいっぱいいたんだ。何にもないけど平和になったよ。ユーナたちが一生懸命戦ってくれたから、神様たちの闘争が楽しい大会になったんだよね。
信頼できる仲間の情報だ。間違いないぜ。
仲間って違う世界の人？
ああ、俺は全員初めまして。
そういうのいいよね。普通に過ごしてたら絶対会えなかった人たちとつながれるんだ。私も前の闘争で頑張れたのは違う世界のみんなが一緒にいたからだよ。会えたら紹介してね。
遠まで行けば誰かはいると思うぞ。みんな何度も来てる。誰かもね。
そうなんですか？
来たついでに闘争を手伝うんだってさ。任務の一環だと割り切ってるらしいさ。
眉間にしわ寄せて言ってそう。
おお、当たってる。
そういう人よーく知ってるの。じゃあ早く会いに行こう。もう行き違いにならないように。ユーナ、ありがとね。ロックさんも。二人が私を見つけてくれなかったら、今もずっと不安なままだった。私たち、もう仲間だよ。
困った時はお互い様ってね。
楽しいとあっという間だね。キラキラと光る空、願い。
Тогда мужики говорят, он следует. Молодец, молодец.
I am here to sign a document betting $10,000 that my last video is in fact correct. This is the video in question. Some people may have missed it, but in this car there is no motor, no batteries, no energy source besides the wind itself. And the counterintuitive claim is that this car can maintain speeds faster than the wind that's pushing it. There is a physics professor at UCLA who got in touch to say that he thought that I was wrong, that the explanation was wrong. You know, we went back and forth a little bit, and eventually I said, well, how about we bet $10,000. I can prove it to you, this vehicle really can go downwind faster than the wind. And to my surprise, he is taking me up on the bet.
Look, no one is perfect, but you have a much lower error rate than most people on YouTube, in YouTube space.
Now, Professor Alex Kusenko...
Error rate than most people on YouTube, in YouTube space.
Now, Professor Alex Kusenko wanted this wager and all related discourse to be public. In fact, he suggested we get a celebrity to witness the signing. So I asked Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, and Sean Carroll to be our witnesses, and they graciously agreed.
And Alex, I just want to say, I agree with everything you said about Veritasium, that generally I can watch it and not have to wonder, is he going to mess up? Or how am I
No, he's brilliant.
No, he's brilliant.
I'm excited about this bet because if I am wrong, then I want to know. Like, the whole point of the channel is to get to the truth, and that is, I think, why we're all here today, and I think, you know, this is a great chance to sort of see. I'm going to summarize Alex's main points in this video, but I'll put his full presentation here.
So let me first explain what I see in the video. In the video, the vehicle is that's operated in a gusty wind, initially you have the wind speed exceeding the car speed. But then the wind speed is not constant. The wind speed drops, and the car moves by inertia with deceleration for a while.
So basically, Alex thinks a gust pushes the car to a high speed, and then when the wind dies, the car is going faster than the wind momentarily, but it must be slowing down.
And that will be my conclusion at the end of this presentation, that whenever you have velocity faster than the wind, I'll actually show you in an equation, the acceleration is negative. The second effect is that the wind in the video is measured at the height of about a meter or meter and a half. But the propeller goes to some 3 meters above the ground.
Now, due to interactions with the ground, there is a wind gradient. Wind travels slower, close to the ground, and then faster higher up. Now, Alex estimated that the wind speed of the propeller might be 10 or 15% higher than at the telltale. So it's possible that the car could be moving slower than the wind at the propeller, and yet appear to be moving faster than the wind at the height of the telltale.
Now, I think that this is a small effect. However, in combination with the previous effect, it just can make this more frequent. Okay, and that concludes.
If I remember the video correctly, Derek reports that they've achieved up to 2.8 times wind speed. That feels much higher than what is possible here, unless the wind had picked up and then spontaneously sort of dropped.
Very, very good question. Okay, if you're going for the record, you probably will do many attempts. You will be sampling that gusty wind over and over and over until you set the record. Right? That's how you set the record. And on one of those occasions, you will get a nice strong gust, which is 3 times the air that comes after. Okay, and that's when you will clock the record, and that's where that 2.8 factor will come in.
So what about the treadmill tests? These are conducted in still air. By moving the ground backwards, you're simulating a perfectly steady tailwind. And if you hold the car stationary on the treadmill, well, that's equivalent to the car going exactly wind speed. Now, if the car can move forward on the treadmill, that shows it can accelerate faster than the wind. But Alex had multiple explanations why these experiments don't actually show what they claim to show.
If you have this fluctuating speed of the treadmill, and then if a human just sort of steers it, it then can introduce unconsciously a bias towards the desired result.
So would it may be that the guy with the spork is inducing the model craft to go across the lane now and then?
So
as you pointed out,
I'm sure. I'm 100% sure that the guy in the video doesn't do it on purpose. Okay?
Yeah.
However, if he is expecting forward drift.
Yeah. Oh, it's classic.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. That's what exactly. Okay, so you got it.
In the absence of convincing experimental evidence, Alex turned to theoretical analyses, like one by MIT Aero professor Mark Drella. But here too, he found problems. His main concern is that the equation for net force includes the difference between the speeds of the car and the wind in the denominator, which seems to imply that when traveling exactly wind speed, you should get infinite force.
Now here's the real danger. Because if Derek drives very close to the wind, that difference in speed goes to 0. If it's 1/1,000,000th of a 1%, that's like a nuclear bomb exploding behind him. Then Derek is definitely in trouble, right? So we need to find something to save Derek's life here. This is serious, right?
But dividing by 0, come on, you guys. I never looked at that.
Alex performed his own analysis and found no such divide by 0 problems. In fact, he found there's no way for the cart to accelerate at or above wind speed.
The acceleration of this craft is negative. So when so it's possible to move the craft faster than the wind, but it's not possible to move it at 0 acceleration, which would be needed to maintain constant speed.
That is basically where we left it.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. So now it was up to me to convince Professor Kosenko that Blackbird really can go faster than the wind. But his presentation was effective. When I posted about it on Twitter, Alice Zhang, who runs Chinese Veritasium, said, "I think you lost, Derek. I'm 80% on Alex's side now." What's amazing to me is that neither one of them had seen my attempts to replicate the treadmill experiments. For the first video, I asked my friend and YouTube maker Zyla Foxland to make a model downwind cart.
Oh no!
Version 1 ended in failure, but Zyla was undeterred, coming back in a couple days with version 2. Is it feeling like it's gonna... Unlike these models, most of her projects actually work. She is determined. So maybe this tells us something about whether you can actually go faster than the wind downwind. What was clear to me is that I didn't do a good enough job in the first video explaining how Blackbird works and providing convincing evidence that it can really go faster than the wind in a sustained way. In my defense, I thought the concept was well enough established. Way back in 1969, Andrew Bauer built the first successful downwind cart, and he did it to settle a friendly wager with aero engineer Apollo Smith. The bet was inspired by a claim in a student's paper from 20 years earlier. Now, Rick Cavallaro, the builder of Blackbird, was completely unaware of all this until after he built his cart. But other analyses have been published under names like the Push Me, Pull You boat. So I didn't honestly think anyone would doubt the vehicle's operation, much less bet me $10,000. But clearly there is a need for a deeper explanation. So I want to do that now by responding to the points Alex raised. So first, let's deal with wind gradient. I mean, why didn't we measure the speed of the wind higher up? Well, the answer is because it's already been done. They mounted telltales on fishing poles out to the sides of the propeller and even above it. Now, although the lowest telltale flips back first, all of the telltales do eventually flip backwards, showing that every part of the vehicle is going faster than the wind. Could this be because of a big wind gust that pushed the car up to high speed and then the wind died? I don't think so. Even though I didn't have a speedometer in the car for my runs, someone on Twitter pointed out that we could use the rotation of the back wheel to determine the speed from the video footage. This shows that even after the telltale flips backwards, the car keeps accelerating. Another thing I want to point out is that if wind gradient or gusts were the reason that the car travels faster than the wind, well, you'd expect the telltale to jump around or at least not point straight back at me. But it consistently does for over 30 seconds until I had to hit the brakes to avoid crashing into parked vehicles. But if that's not enough for you, when Blackbird achieved its record speed of 27.7 miles per hour in a 10-mile-per-hour tailwind, it was still accelerating. And we know this because there were multiple GPS units in the car and wind speeds which were measured at the height of the propeller at multiple locations. The highlighted section shows the 10-second measurement period over which the record was set. Also, in 2013, the US Physics Olympiad semifinal exam asked questions about Blackbird, like, can it go faster than the wind downwind? And upwind. The solution says both modes are possible. And with sufficiently low energy loss, any speed is possible. Now, I'll admit that the evidence I showed in the first video was not definitive. Wind gusts or gradients could have explained the observations. But now that you've seen this evidence, are you convinced that Blackbird can go downwind faster than the wind without slowing down? Well, Professor Kosenko was not convinced. So I want to explain how the car works so clearly that no one, not even the professor, can doubt what's going on. The first thing to know is that the propeller doesn't work like most people think. It's not working like a windmill. It doesn't turn the way the tailwind is pushing it. Instead, it turns in the opposite direction, working like a fan to push air backwards. This fan is powered by the wheels, which are connected to the propeller by a bike chain. So at wind speed, the car can keep accelerating because the wheels turn the fan, which blows air back, generating forward thrust. Now the big question is, to drive the fan, there must be a backwards force on the wheels, which tends to slow them down. So why isn't this force bigger than the thrust from the propeller, causing the car to slow down overall? Well, the answer is the wheels are going so much faster over the ground than the propeller is moving through the air, so the thrust force can actually be larger. I'm going to do an analysis in the frame of reference of the car. Thrust force can be so much faster over the ground than the propeller is moving through the air, so the thrust force can actually be larger. I'm going to do an analysis in the frame of reference of the car. And the important equation to know is power equals force times velocity. So at the wheels, power is input into the system by the ground moving underneath the car. The power generated is the force of the ground on the wheels times the velocity of the car. At the propeller, work is done on the air as the propeller pushes it backwards. The power out equals the force of the prop on the air times the speed of the car minus the speed of the wind. The prop is going slower through the air due to the tailwind. And if we assume no losses, then the power in at the wheels equals the power out at the propeller. From this equation, we can see that the force at the propeller will be greater than the force at the wheels. And since the propeller is pushing air back, the air applies an equal and opposite force forward on the prop. This is the thrust force, which will be greater than the backwards force on the wheels. So this car works like a lever or a pulley. By applying a small force to the wheels over a larger distance, the propeller can apply a larger force over a smaller distance. This is just like when you're riding a bike going uphill. You move the pedals fast, but with smaller force, to make the wheels move slower over the ground, but with a bigger force. But now we've run into the divide by zero problem that Professor Kosenko warned us about. When the speed of the car is exactly equal to the speed of the wind, it seems like the propeller can provide infinite force. That can't be right, can it? I mean, is our analysis flawed? And the answer is no, for two reasons. First of all, this is exactly what you'd expect, theoretically, with any lever or pulley. If one arm of the lever is zero, then you can lift an infinite weight with any amount of force on the other side. The catch is, its displacement will be zero. Second of all, in practice, there is a propeller efficiency term that is ill-defined when the propeller is not moving through the air.
There's a better formula for the prop efficiency, which is well defined in the zero airspeed limit. It makes an algebraic mess, but it's perfectly well defined.
And then the divide by zero problem is eliminated. That equation makes the problem look more complicated than it actually is. You don't actually need aerodynamics. Here I have a little cart with a big wheel that rolls on two smaller spools. And what I'm going to show is that when you have two media moving relative to one another, well then if this car is in contact with both media, it can actually move faster than their relative velocity. So as I push the board to the right, you can see that the car goes down the board faster than the board is moving. If you look carefully, you'll see that the big wheel isn't turning the way that the board is pushing it. It's actually rotating in the opposite direction. That's just like the propeller on Blackbird, which pushes back against the air, and that's how it's able to go faster than the wind downwind. And you can build one of these cars for yourself at home, or you can build a model downwind cart. I told you Zyla was determined. Yeah, I'm going to make the claim on camera. I think it's going to work this time. We're changing the propeller.
It has to work before we get kicked out of the treadmill store.
Does it work?
It totally works.
Amazing.
Oh my god, it's so good.
The fourth version of the cart works spectacularly, and it was designed to be replicated by anyone using just a 3D printer and a simple list of materials. She explains how to build it with more details on the engineering process on a video over on her channel, so go check it out. Now, Professor Kosenko has now conceded the bet, and he transferred $10,000 to me. So I want to thank him for being a man of honor and changing his mind in light of the evidence I presented, which is really not easy to do, especially in a public debate like this one. Now, I do not want to keep the money. I want to invest it in science communication. So I'm holding a 1-minute video competition. I'll be awarding cash prizes to the top 3 videos that explain a counterintuitive STEM concept. I'll put some details down in the description. What I love about science is that disagreements are not problems. They are opportunities for everyone to learn something. I learned a lot more about Blackbird, aerodynamics, and gear ratios than I knew before. I also learned that I should go into more depth in my videos. I should make the evidence overwhelmingly convincing and put in some equations toward the end for those who want that level of detail. I want to thank everyone involved in the making of this video: Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, Sean Carroll, Mark Drella, Professor Kosenko, and Zyla Foxlin, but especially Rick Cavallaro, the inventor and creator of Blackbird. He was a fountain of information a constant source of support and the man leading the charge to help people understand this area of physics for the past 15 years. Let's hope this video puts the issue to rest once and for all. The Blackbird craft all started with a brain teaser, and this video sponsor, Brilliant, offers you a daily problem to solve every day, like this one about gear ratios. If the first gear spins 10 times per second, at what rate does the final gear spin? Now, I did this problem the hard way, but my wife figured out how to do it the easy way. And that's what brain teasers are great for. They get you thinking about the world, and they give you insights into problems you might think you already understand. Just think about how much more you would understand in a year if you got into the habit of solving one novel, unexpected problem per day. And while you're at it, why not take one of Brilliant's courses, like on computer science, neural networks, or classical physics? Even physics professors can benefit from some lessons on frames of reference. Somehow, I managed to go my whole degree without learning Lagrangian mechanics, so that's a course I'm working through at the moment. It's a really elegant way of solving physics problems, and I wish I had learned about it sooner. For viewers of this channel, Brilliant are offering 20% off an annual subscription to the first 200 people to sign up. Just go to brilliant.org/Veritasium. I will put that link down in the description. So I want to thank Brilliant for supporting Veritasium, and I want to thank you for watching.
Dash after you. On your side.
Нет, потому что все играют. Look my head up. Yeah. Roger. Garlic. Isn't so garlic. Это уже правильно. Наоборот, блин. Вот это есть.
Welcome to today's talk. It's Wednesday, the 17th of November, and as you'll see, it's a fairly grey day outside here in the north of England. And I'm going to be giving evidence from a paper today, and the authors of this paper are suggesting that to get the optimum amount of vitamin D in the blood, to get the best amount of vitamin D in the blood, at this time of year, adults need to be taking 4 to 10,000 units of vitamin D extra per day. That's 100 to 250 micrograms extra vitamin D per day. And they're also suggesting that with this, we take 200 micrograms of vitamin K2 to make sure that the calcium that's released by the vitamin D goes into the bones and not into the tissues. So I'm going to do this video in 2 parts because it's quite involved. So I'm just going to give a short video now where we get the main points of this across if you've only got 5 or 10 minutes. So COVID-19 mortality, which correlates inversely with vitamin D3 status, is what this paper is about. In other words, you're more likely to die if your vitamin D is low. And they're saying that death rate could theoretically be brought down to close to 0. Now, of course, they're not saying that death rate ever would be 0 because there's always other factors involved. But this is a theoretical consideration, but it shows the power, potentially, the beneficial power of increasing our levels of vitamin D in the blood. And it's a systematic review and meta-analysis. Now, this is the paper here, and of course, I always put the links to it. Heidelberg and Tübingen in Germany. It's a very impressive paper, actually. You can download the PDF. You can get, I think this is the full text version of on there. So, yeah, it's all there. And this paper actually is very, very well written. It's properly translated, and it's quite intelligible. If you read this, you will understand it. It's not in scientific gobbledygook at all. Let's get straight down to it. Blood calcifidiol, that's the active form of vitamin D in the blood, correlates strongly with SARS coronavirus 2 infection severity and in death. So no one really disagrees with this. The question is that some people are saying, well, it's actually the fact that you get sick that lowers your vitamin D levels. Well, I think it's people with low vitamin D levels that are likely to get sick in the first place, and that's what this paper is about, and that's what this paper argues for strongly, and in my view is, well, it's just inexplicable why you haven't taken it on by now. This really needs to get its way into public health, government ordained advice, and it's simply not getting there. So is it cause or effect? So we believe it's cause, and that's what this paper is arguing for. Now, the strength of our immune system, more or less neglected by the responsible authorities, and I think you have to say this is right. You know, the authorities are focused on social restrictions and lockdown measures, vaccination measures, some might say expensive pharmaceuticals, whereas we're not saying that those things are wrong, but we're saying we need to get the immune system optimized first, and it just doesn't seem to have been addressed very much, which is a bit surprising. So nutrition, physical fitness, recreation, sleep, all of these things very important. Vitamin D deficiency is widespread in Europe and the United States, Canada, we know that. And the interesting thing, the data for this study was collected in March 2021, and it was collected from people that were unvaccinated. So this is not data which has been affected by vaccination. It's showing an independent beneficial effect from optimizing vitamin D levels in the blood. So it's a systematic literature review, retrospective cohort study. There was one good European-wide study on that, so there was one of those. And there were 7 clinical studies, and they came to pretty well the same conclusion. Now, this is good because one is a population study on basically healthy people who became ill. And the other is clinical studies on people who were ill. So 2 different ways of collecting data that came to essentially the same conclusions, and we'll see that they are very, very closely related. Another reason I think these results are correct. Reported vitamin D levels pre-infection or on the day of hospital admission. So the big thing about this was they took people into the study who they knew what the vitamin D levels were before, or they took it on the first day of hospitalization. And the key thing here is this is before the illness would have had a chance to lower their vitamin D levels. So it's not after the illness has lowered their vitamin D levels, it's what their vitamin D levels were to begin with. And of course, people with lower vitamin D levels did worse. People with higher vitamin D levels did better. Of course, they corrected the results for mortality rates for age, sex, diabetes, all the things you would expect. It's a well-controlled study. Now, the results, what they found was a negative Pearson correlation between D3 levels and mortality risk. Now, this Pearson correlation is just a statistical tool. And it's a negative correlation. In other words, as vitamin D levels go up, illness goes down. Or as vitamin D levels go down, illness goes up. So just to clarify that, because I know that can be a bit confusing. So if we look at smoking and lung cancer, we could look at towns or countries where there's, so people that smoke more get more lung cancer. So we kind of get an upward trend like that. That would be a positive correlation like that. More smoking causes more lung cancer. Well, there's correlation. That's how the cause of lung cancer was first identified. But we can also have negative correlations as well. So negative correlation, like if you look at the amount of exercise and the amount of obesity, that would go the other way around. It would be, the line would be in that direction. It would be the opposite effect. So whereas that one's a positive effect, this one will be an inverse or a negative effect between exercise and obesity, for example. So that's what these things are. They are these correlations. And these two different ways of collecting the data, like we said. One was negative 0.4 and one was negative 0.4 in a bit. So both negative. Now, if the correlation is -1, that's a perfect negative correlation. If it's 0, there's no correlation at all. If it's +1, that's a perfect positive correlation. So we can see it's quite a convincing correlation here. I'm going to show you the lines in a minute. Now, the combined data set, they found that the median levels of vitamin D were 23.2 nanograms per mil, but as we'll look at, they want it to be higher than that. So anyway, when they looked at the combined data, now the more astute of you will have realized that the studies on their own, that p-value there is not actually significant. And that p-value is not actually significant. We need 0.05 or less. So really that's non-significant data. But when they combined the data sets, you did get very significant data, which is good. So here we have that here. The overall negative correlation was 3.9, and that does give a very significant result. And the regression suggested a theoretical point of 0 mortality at 50 nanograms per mil of vitamin D. Now, they're not saying this will happen, of course not, they're not stupid, but it's a theoretical pointer. And here are the negative correlations here. So they are pretty convincing. Now, the green one is the combined data, the red one is the population study, and the black one is the hospital data. But we can see for this way of measuring death here, so that's increasing deaths up there. So as the vitamin D levels increased to increasing levels 10, 20, 30, so that's increasing vitamin D levels up there, we see that the death rate went down. And the green line we said there is the combined data. And the green line crosses the bottom line there at 0 deaths at about just over 50, as we've said. So it's a theoretical consideration, but that would be 50 nanograms per mil of vitamin D. But there's very, very clear trends there that the higher the levels of vitamin D, the lower the levels of death. It's very, very clear from that. High levels of vitamin D, lower levels of death. That contributes up there. So as the vitamin D levels increased to increasing levels 10, 20, 30, so that's increasing vitamin D levels up there, we see that the death rate went down. And the green line we said there is the combined data. And the green line crosses the bottom line there at 0 deaths at about just over 50, as we've said. So it's a theoretical consideration, but that would be 50 nanograms per mil of vitamin D. But there's very, very clear trends there that the higher the levels of vitamin D, the lower the levels of death. It's very, very clear from that. High levels of vitamin D, lower levels of death. And we believe that, as we've said, we believe that this is not an effect, we believe it's a cause, because the vitamin D levels were known before the people were ill. So it's pretty convincing. Now, a lot more scientific data on the second video, but let's just give some brief conclusions now from this. The authors say, direct quote, the data set provides strong evidence that low D3 is a predictor rather than just a side effect of a severe infection. Despite ongoing vaccinations, we recommend raising serum 25 vitamin D levels to above 50 nanograms per mil. So that is what they recommend. And to do that, they have found that to do that consistently, you need these kind of levels. 4,000 to 10,000 international units of vitamin D per day. That's 100 micrograms to 250 micrograms per day for adults when the weather's cold like this, as in overcast. And they also recommend, as we'll see later, taking 200 micrograms of vitamin K2 with it. The fact that governments are not acting on this now that there's so much evidence, and I'll be giving stacks of evidence in the next video, it really is, it's hard to understand why governments are not taking action on this now. So keep that short and sweet at the moment, and we'll look at more data in the next video. Thanks for watching this short one.
Вы получили 26 миллионов денег? 26 миллионов? Ёпарас, это я сейчас могу нанять вам кучу героев. 222к повреждений героев. Охренеть! Слушай, здесь монстры какие-то по 7 миллионов.
I feel like what I'm really finding out is, did I just waste a good part of my life on this? So let's try it.
I recently talked to a psychologist and she was like, Matthias, you need to get a girlfriend.
But to be fair, I don't think she knew that I have 5 pianos and I just bought a house so I can fit more of them.
But the problem with owning a lot of pianos is that pianos are so hard to keep in tune. And you need years of experience to tune them perfectly yourself. And that's where piano technicians comes in. If you follow my channel, you know that I always hire my friend the piano tech to come over and tune my pianos professionally. That's why the following news made me really sad. Right after I bought my house, I got an email from the piano tech. He told me that he's moving far, far away from me. He got a new job in the capital of Sweden, 500 kilometers away. And first, I got really sad because he's the only reason that you're subscribed to my channel. Then I realized that, wait, who's going to tune my pianos now? So I asked you guys for advice and you gave me an idea. Let me give you the pitch. A piano has 230 strings, and these strings are getting hit by a total of 88 hammers. If I exchange every hammer with an actual tuning fork and modify the forks to match the notes on the piano, I will have the first piano in the world that will never go out of tune. I mean, it will, but let me show you. Okay, so I assume that you completely didn't understand the idea, because everyone knows tuning forks exist, but we don't know really why they exist. So I spent 1% of a whole day learning about tuning forks, just so I can quickly teach you how they work, so you don't get lost here in the video.
So you just hit it at something, and it plays a note.
But that's the thing, the fork already plays a musical note by itself, and since they can impossibly go out of tune, I can easily use them as a reference whenever I need to retune my piano. And not only that, I can't even imagine what playing this piano will actually end up sounding like.
I still don't know why it exists.
Now when you're much wiser, let's go get another victim to experiment on. I told my piano dealer I will be there in 10 minutes, so let's go.
Audio Jungle.
Вы получили 26.
Ja, alltid det igång, så kan jag klippa lite i det sen. Ja, låter som ett piano. Ja. Den är jättefin. Jag ska byta ut handrörarna mot sådana stängljävlar. Du vet sådana där som du slår på något. Exakt. Så det är det jag ska sätta på. If you want to see the entire visit and a lot of piano testing, I posted a 13-minute video for Patreon supporters. And you guys say I have too many pianos. I haven't even shown you the second floor. He asked me if I wanted to jump into the band because he had a surprise waiting for me inside. Nej, jag kan gå in och kolla. I ended up buying this Swedish piano in pretty good condition for $575. Let's quickly listen to what it sounds like. This piano definitely needs to be tuned, so I guess that's pretty convenient. As always, I completely freeze when it's actually time to start the project. So I asked the engineers in the community post if you had any advice to push me in the right direction. Some of you told me that why not just remove the strings of the pianos and make the hammers hit the tuning forks. I thought, whoa, that's kind of smart. So I spent hours excitedly looking for tuning forks to put in my piano when this happened. That's called a dulce tone. I still can't believe that thing actually already exists. I read about the dulce tone for a while, so you don't have to. You know why they made it like that 160 years ago? Because it would never go out of tune. So I guess piano memes are pretty old. But the good news are that the original idea is stupid enough so it has never in history been attempted before. Let's just order a few test forks, start working, and just solve the problems as we go. 3 hours later, I think I found a promising model out of aluminium. I ordered 8 for $28 first, just to test this out before ruining myself. So I just unboxed the tuning forks, and I have a small problem. They're not in tune. None of them. Okay, let me show you. You see? It's not even close. So how do we tune a tuning fork? A few minutes later, someone on Discord sent me this formula. Using it, we can see that if the fork gets shorter, the pitch gets higher. So I think we all know what I need to do. File it. Yeah, that's pretty satisfying. But was it worth 2 hours? Now when I got that out of the way, it was time to somehow put them on the piano. The first idea was to use a square of wood and use it as a connector, kind of like this. I ended up not going with this idea because I was pretty sure it wouldn't really fit. Eventually I realized that because of the design of these forks, it might be possible to just drill a hole straight into the fork and just joint them on the piano. So I went to BTM to buy a drill press for $230 so I could easily make 88 identical holes in an angle. I made sure that I wrote the assembly instructions correctly. The next day, I did a few test holes because I was kind of scared of drilling into the forks, considering I only had 8 of them so far and there was no more left in stock. But once I got braver, I made hole after hole and ruined a bunch of tuning forks. And not a single one of them was in the middle, as I wanted. On top of that, I also realized that the hole kind of messed up the tuning of the fork. So that was 2 wasted hours of tuning. I honestly already here almost gave up on this project, but instead I decided to send a video of me drilling to Discord for advice. I listened to her advice and built this, and then my dad remade it so it was actually 45 degrees. I tried with the thing, but I still couldn't make a centered hole. I watched YouTube tutorials for hours and followed the exact steps, and I still couldn't put the hole in the middle. All of this leads me to the confession that I'm not actually an engineer. I'm kidding. Something must be wrong with my drilling machine. After one day, I realized that You kind of need a drill to make a hole, so I started to do some research. Every Swedish forum told me that I could get an industry standard legendary oil drill called Arboga for a decent price if I got it used. So I went to Facebook Marketplace and eventually found a guy selling it. I used my exceptional bargaining skills and almost ended up increasing the price. So now it's time to meet him in his basement. I was so proud of my new drill I got for $760, so I shared a video of it to Discord. So to use this 300-pound drill, apparently I need like a 2-ton steel table to mount it, and I don't have time to mess with that. I thought it was plug and play. The next day, I told my parents, and they said,
But why you only bought half drill when farmer has 3? By the way, about that tax evasion.
So I just glued on the first fork, and I promise you, I've not tried it yet just to keep the tension. You know, I'm already 100 hours into this video. If this doesn't work, it doesn't make enough sound, I think I would cry. Let's try. That's loud.
Audio Jungle.
So you might say, Matthias, why do you tune the piano if the entire premise of the video is don't go too much into the details, okay? It would be kind of stupid to match the forks to a piano that is out of tune. It took me 10 hours, yeah, and it's still kind of out of tune. Remember when I put hammers on the piano and then lied to pro pianists that we were making a virtual instrument so they would actually come over? It turns out that I'm quite an honest guy.
Hi, this is Andrew Person with Impact Soundworks, and today I'll be demonstrating our newest virtual instrument, counterclavier.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm really interested to see what the piano tech is going to say about this. You can buy it for $69 if you want to try it right now, and I get a percentage of the sales, so you will support the channel at the same time. There's a bunch of reviews online already.
And you get those really aggressive attacks down here with that steel hammer hitting those strings. Just really nice nice and delicate.
Now let's hope the seller got some more tuning forks. Very conveniently, the seller on Amazon got 3 more packages back in stock, so I bought all of them. But this time, the price was increased from $28 to $36 per package, which was kind of sus. It was time to get back to the drill, but this time on my own. I was a bit worried that I was the common denominator when it came to not being able to aim with the thing. But 4 hours later, I had only ruined 4 tuning forks, and the rest was honestly pretty perfect. Now it was time to find a faster way to tune the forks. I borrowed this sander that almost unallied me, only to end up buying a better one from BTM for $175. Wow, I haven't learned anything, have I? I put on my radiation suit, as you safety people recommended, and prepared a bucket of water. Guys, I'm not 5 years old. I'm not going to burn myself. After grinding until midnight, I woke up the next day only to realize that my entire batch of forks had lost the tuning I worked on so carefully. I was kind of confused because I don't know what they did when I was sleeping. So I started to grind on them again. Here, I checked the pitch on the fork, which was pretty perfect. But then, I burned myself on that fork, so I quickly cooled it down. When I tested the pitch again, it was completely changed. Oh, it's the heat of the fork that changed the pitch. So I can either just redo all the forks, or I can just heat up the piano whenever it's time to play. One day later, I realized that I still only had 4 forks on the piano. What really took the time was making the forks hit at the exact same spot as the original piano hammers. Especially since every fork had a unique tuning, it also meant they had a unique length. So I engineered this complicated device. And now I can just draw a straight line and match the forks to the line. But then I was like, oh, this is kind of awkward. The hammers isn't in a straight line. But that's when I actually came up with an idea that was good. Once I had finally put on the first 14 forks, I realized that they were already getting quite big and would in no way fit if I don't come up with a tuning trick. The piano techs advised me to look up something called duplex scales. I made some research and found a patent made 1872 by Theodor Steinway. I don't know why this guy would know anything about pianos, but it's the best idea we have. The idea was to use overtones to make the piano sound more epic, while at the same time keeping the forks smaller. Mom, can we get a new piano? No, Matthias, we have piano at home. Piano at home? The seller now had 6 more packages in stock, but this time they were raised from $38 to $50. But I kind of needed them, so I emptied their entire stock again. Watching this video so far, you might think to yourself, I wish I was the seller who's selling all those tuning forks, Matthias. That's why this video is sponsored by Unbounce. Unbounce is the leading landing page builder that helps you convert more visitors to, for example, sign up to your guitar lessons, download your ebook to get your bigger email list, or just sell your weird engineering stuff. In many of those cases, linking to a full-on website isn't really the best idea because it's full of other distractions. Instead, use a landing page with one clear goal: to get the highest conversion rate possible. Unbounce's latest AI-powered feature, Smart Traffic, can help you increase your conversion rate by up to 30% by automatically checking out your visitor and then deliver an optimized page just for them. I was in the top 100 percentile in my programming class, so I can happily assure you that there's no coding required. You can just drag and drop and have a super professional landing page made with no developer involved. So go to unbounce.com/Matthias and use promo code Matthias to get 20% off your first 3 months. That's unbounce.com/Matthias. Use promo code Matthias for 20% off, or click the link below. So it will be kind of awkward if that link isn't the landing page now. Oh, yeah. How did I know I was a narcissist? Up to this point, the project had been going fairly well, considering how useless I am. But even when using my tricks, the tuning forks started to get so big that they were hitting the dampers on the piano, so I will have to start bending them out of the way. However, if I mess them up, it's over for this piano. I also had to start messing with the angles of the forks, so it was time to build a new angle thing. The one I made first was falling apart, so I made a new one that might actually be more unsymmetrical than my face. So I asked my dad to help me make another one. I've been working 14-hour days up to this point, and this is where it really started to show, I think. I proceeded by drilling 45-degree angles in the wrong forks. It's the wrong forks. Which costed me $48 in minutes and added back 4 hours of work since they had to be retuned. Then I realized something with my angle thing. Oh, it's 30 degrees the other way.
До тех пор делать это по-старому, 60 секунд, которые ты не забудешь никогда.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. So what I wanted to do today is talk about Tchaikovsky's music, specifically his piano music and the range of difficulty levels for the individual pieces. So on this video, I want to share with you what I consider to be the easiest pieces that Tchaikovsky